Good evening. We are back again for the second part of our No Debt, No Sweat workshop. We are just so thankful to have had Brother Diggs to be with us. He has done a phenomenal job thus far. We are looking forward to this next installment and then as well for Monday. And we hope and trust that you will be with us at 7 o'clock tomorrow night as well, and to get some more great information to help reboot your growth in the area of your finances. This has been such a joy to have Brother Diggs with us, and he is going to come in a few minutes to give us the hope that you as a family are working together through your workbook, and we appreciate so many this afternoon to pick up the resources that Brother Diggs has with him, and we hope and trust that those resources will be helpful to your as we look to ready, set, grow in this quarter. All right, so at this time we will receive our brother in Christ, Brother Steve Diggs from the Antioch congregation in Tennessee.
Thank you, John. I am so glad to see everybody back there. I'm like your romper room teacher on television. You remember when we were kids and the romper room teacher would hold up the mirror and it would open up and she said, I can see Billy, and I can see Freddie and Judy and Jackie. I can see all of you out there. Not, but I can pretend like I do. So I'm so glad that we're together again tonight. Tonight, we're going to be getting into our second session. We're going to talk about the A, the B, and the C of godly money management. You may have heard about the old girl. She was not a very happy wife. Her husband was kind of wishy-washy, kind of willy-nilly, kind of come and go, not very responsible. And finally, she had all she was going to put up with of this stuff. And one day she looked at him and she said, listen to me, I've had it with this marriage of ours. And he said, well, honey, what in the world is wrong? She said, I'll tell you what's wrong. You're just not very responsible. You're wishy-washy, you're willy-nilly. I just can't take it any longer. He said, well, honey, what do you think we ought to do about this? She said, I'll tell you what we need to do about it. We need to get some counseling. So he said, well, honey, you go right ahead and schedule it. I'll come with you. Well, so about a week or so later, they go to see the counselor. And they're sitting there talking to the counselor. It doesn't take the counselor very long to realize that, he can see the problem. So he gets a little bit upset. He stands up from behind his desk, walks around to the front of the desk, and he grabs the woman by her shoulders, stands her up, throws his arms around this girl, gives her the biggest kiss she's ever had in her life, sits her back down, walks back around, looks at her husband and says, now listen, sport, that's what your wife needs at least twice every week. The guy looked at the doctor and said, well, I reckon I could get her in here maybe on Tuesdays and Thursdays. Folks, here's my point. There are some things in this world, if we're going to do them, we're pretty much responsible for being sure we do them ourselves. And guys, kissing on your own wives, that is your job. Ain't nobody else in charge of that one. And the same is true with our money. Our money is a very personal thing that we need to have management control over at all times. And in this very visit here, I want to talk a little bit about how to do that. And I don't know any way to start an ABC list out without starting with the A, so let's just do that first. I want to talk to you a little bit about the A of learning to acknowledge who it is that owns all of the money. Until Christians understand that God owns it all, we're going to be constantly living sort of a split life. We're going to be 1 foot in the world, we're going to be 1 foot in the kingdom, and we're never going to be very comfortable. It's when we begin to realize that God owns all the stuff, and He just lets us use it. That's when we start to change our viewpoints, our peace returns, and suddenly we don't have as much stress with what the money is for, where it's going, and so forth. There are at least 3 principles of scriptural principles that I think that deal with our giving, and I want to get to these because these to me are fundamental. The first principle of godly giving is to understand that God, I think, expects us to give to Him from our first fruits. You know, the proverb writer said, honor the Lord from your wealth and from the first of all of your produce. And why is that? So your barns will be filled with plenty and your vats will overflow with new wine. It is so important important, in my judgment, for us to be first fruit givers. We don't tend to do this very well, but we need to learn how to. And by the way, this first fruit giving thing is not complicated stuff. It's mentioned in both the Old and the New Testament, mentioned more than 15, 20, actually more than 20 times in the scriptures as we go through them. And again, like I said, it is not difficult stuff. It is not the kind of thing that takes a real Bible scholar like Brother Gibbs to teach. It's simple, understanding stuff that essentially says God gets the first and God gets the best. That's what first fruit giving is all about. I'll tell you something that helped Bonnie and me many, many years ago. Shortly after we were married, we realized that our hearts were sometimes better than our behavior. We would sometimes get real excited about a ministry that needed help or some mission point or whatever, and we'd think, oh, we're going to give some money to this. But then the time would come and we'd sort of conveniently forget about it or maybe spend the money on something else. One of the things that helped us a lot, and this is something you might want to consider doing yourself if you struggle with this, we went down to the bank and we opened up a little Plain Jane savings account. But we call this Plain Jane savings account, we call it our first fruits account. Now, this was a way to keep us remembering that really this money was not just there for us to play with. This was money that was set aside for godly causes. And then when a missionary needed help, or maybe a minister needed some help, or maybe it was just a mama that needed a bag of groceries, we were always, like the Bible says, we were always ready unto every good work. And it changed the dynamic of so much in our lives. Very helpful. And by the way, let me just say this before I leave this point. I'm not suggesting that it's my theology that we Christians need to just kind of store up our money and wait for God to come and tap us on the shoulder and say, Psst, Steve, now's the time to give this money. That money that Bonnie and I were putting into our first fruits account was money that was over and above our regular giving. I really believe that as a Christian, our job is to do our giving where we do our going. That means that if you're a member here at Greenville Avenue, this is where you ought to be doing your regular, routine, dependable, ongoing, sacrificial giving. And one of the funny things when I travel around the country to different churches and I do the No Debt seminar, at church on Sunday morning, I notice this, people kind of be watching me, and when the collection basket comes by, they want to see what the money guy's going to put in. Well, usually I don't put anything in because my wife is at home, or we have made arrangements at home to give to the Antioch congregation where we are members. Now sometimes, I'll throw in a buck or two, just to be seen of men. I'm kidding. I don't do that. But the point is, we need to do, in my judgment, we need to do our giving where we do our going. The sad reality is that only 5% of Christians nationwide are tithing Christians. What does that mean? That means only 5 Christians in 100 are giving God 10% of their income. Now, I know what some of you are saying. You're thinking to yourself, Steve, where does the Bible tell me that I have to give 10%? And honestly, I don't know of any place in the New Testament where it says we have to give 10%. We can give a whole lot more than that if we want to. But here's my point. The Bible does not tell Christians specifically how much to give. And also, sometimes we take passages and we misread them. We misunderstand what is being said about giving. But I do believe that as God grows in an individual's heart, that individual is going to want to give more and more and more of their income to godly purposes. It's just foundational. I got to studying this a ways back. The question to me was, what would it look like if churches all over America, Christians everywhere, were giving 10% of their income to God? Well, according to some studies, there would be an extra I forgot how many billions of dollars, extra $6 billion, I think, I'm wrong. I think it's an extra $120 billion a year that would be given by the average, by Christians nationwide. And it means that in the average sized church, and by the way, folks, Greenville Avenue is a very unusual church. The average sized church in America today is roughly 100 people. But in the average sized church, there would be an additional $200,000 to $300,000 of giving. So here, we can easily multiply that by, say, 20. What do you think you guys could do around here with another $5 or $6 or $7 million a year? Christians, we could reach more people. We could teach more people. We could flip this world around for Jesus Christ. If God's kids just nationwide love God 10% of the way. That's the bottom line that we kind of need to get our arms around and understand here. A second principle that the scriptures share with us on giving is that giving should be a joyful experience. Paul talked about this. He said, let each one of you do just as he's purposed in his own heart, not grudgingly or under compulsion. And why is this? It's because God loves a cheerful giver. Better translation of that word cheerful is hilarious. God wants us to be happy, clappy when we give. We need to be upbeat about it. Now, again, I told you this morning that I'm very frequently disappointed in my own wife's husband on a lot of stuff. And in this case is really no different. Many years ago, I can tell you that I struggled so much with my giving. I still struggle sometimes. But back in those days, I would get excited about something and then I wouldn't do it or whatever. I can remember this was in 1979. It was a couple of years after we'd opened our business. We owned a branding and marketing firm and a radio and TV production firm in Nashville. And this was just a couple of years after we'd opened the business. And I'm telling you, we had like nothing. It was just, by scratch every month just to get by. And I remember that we had maybe $3,000 or $4,000 in the company checking account. That was all we had, and it wasn't there to play with. That was there if the business went down, we needed it. Well, at any rate, I got a phone call from my old college roommate, Bill Turner. And Bill says, Steve, I'm coming to Nashville. We've started a church up here. It was somewhere up in Illinois, as I recall. We've started a church up here, and we need a church bus to pick up kids and bring them to church. I said, well, why don't you come on down here? So he came down. He said, well, what I'm going to have to do is I'm going to be visiting with churches. I need to raise about $3,000. So every day I'd get home from work, I don't know, 9 or 10, 11 o'clock at night, whenever it was. And by the way, if you've ever started a business, you know how tough running a business is. And these were our early years. We were working very, very hard. But at any rate, when I get home at night, I walk down the little hall we had to this little bedroom that we put him in. I'd knock on the door and say, hey, Bill, how did it go today? And I'm telling you, it was the same every night. Well, we went and talked to the elders over here. They didn't have any money. Went and talked to the elders over here. They didn't like buses. Went and talked to the elders over here. They didn't even like us. It was the same old same every night. And it began to dawn on me a few days before Bill left town, Steve, this guy he's not getting any money. He's not getting any money. And Steve, you've got $3,000. Now, have you ever been like this where you knew what you needed to do, but you didn't want to do it? You kind of wish the problem would go away? I'm sitting there about that time thinking, man, I wish I put Bill in a hotel. That way I wouldn't know about all this stuff. But nonetheless, on that last day before he left town, I went and got the company checkbook and I wrote out a check for $3,000. Tore that thing out of the book. And I'm telling you, brother, that thing like stuck to my hand. Here, Bill, take that thing. As he went driving out of town, I was thinking of that as my money. And I was saying bye to it. I'm thinking, Steve, you're going to have to work just that much harder to get along. Now, I'm going to tell you the rest of that story in a minute. The point is, I've not always been a very cheerful giver myself. Here's the third principle of godly giving, and that is that we should be people who give as we have been given. God has always made room for everybody. In the old days, in the Old Testament days, God didn't expect everybody to bring the same kind of sacrifice to the temple. Rich Jews could come with a lamb, they could come with a goat. Poor Jews could come with a dove or with a pigeon. Paul said this, he said, let each one of us put aside and save, how? As he may prosper, so that no collections be made when I come. God has always made room for everything. And I think when we really see godly blessings in our lives, we're going to begin changing our hearts towards God. And I would tell you that there are probably at least 4 countable blessings that I know about that we can see when we begin giving to God the way we should. Number 1, giving frees us from the tyranny of money. If you're stressed about money all the time, worried about not having enough, to give some more of it away. You don't have it anymore. There's nothing to be stressed about. Give it away. Be a free and a generous person. Number 2, giving helps us stay involved in the lives of other folks. I've noticed over the years that people's feet, my own included sometimes, tend to follow the money. It's just amazing. And I've learned that wherever I send my money, that is where I tend to go myself. Many years ago, back when the children were very small, Bonnie and I got excited about mission work, and we started sending some money here and some money there. And it came a point where we realized, man, we've sent a lot of money to some of these folks. Maybe I need to get my feet motivated. Maybe we need to go and visit and work with some of these missionaries. And you talk about 4 kids that had some really cool field trips. They did. We homeschooled our kids, so we were flexible enough to do this. But we were everywhere, Mexico, Russia, China, Egypt, Europe. I can't even think of all the places. Central America. We were all around the world doing mission work, things that we probably would never have done had we not first gotten our dollars going ahead of us. Whatever we do with our dollars is what we're going to tend to do with our feet. A third blessing that comes from giving is just simple personal blessings. If you want to wait until you're dead and gone and let people give everything you've got away, that's up to you. And there's nothing wrong with keeping plenty to live on. I'm not suggesting otherwise. But I am saying that a great thing to do as we're living is to still be doing some giving. Absolutely. You might have heard the story about the very unpopular pig. This very unpopular pig, I'm going to use my hands here instead of a pig and a cow so you'll know what I'm talking about. This very unpopular pig came walking across the barnyard one day to where the very popular cow lived. And the very unpopular pig said to the very popular cow, "Now, people the other animals around here don't like us." The cow looked at the pig and said, "I wonder why." The pig said, "I don't know." The cow said, "Well, how do you pigs do your giving?" The pig said, "Oh, we're great givers. They cut off our little rumps. They call that ham. They whack off our little sides. They call that bacon. And they take our feet and they pickle those suckers. You see, we're great givers." Well, the cow looked at the pig and said, "Well, pig, I can see that you give, but maybe there's a better way to do it." Pig said, "Well, tell me, cow, how do you cows do your giving?" The cow said, "Well, we give our milk, we give our cream, we give our butter." And then the cow looked at the pig and said, "Do you see the difference?" The pig said, "No, I don't." And with that, the cow said, "The difference between the way pigs give and the way we cows give is that we cows do our giving while we're still alive." Be there to see other folk enjoy it. It just changes the dynamic and improves our lives so very much. And a fourth blessing that comes from godly giving, and honestly, I don't know how to teach this. When I get to heaven, I'm going to have some questions to ask about this one. But I do believe that there is a relationship between our giving and our getting from God. Now, I want to be very, very careful. And I loved what the brother preached on this morning when he said and warned us against these TV preachers and people that are in it for the money. And they're telling us that we're going to get rich if we follow God. That is a teaching from the pits. You take that kind of teaching to anybody that's a Christian that living in some of these third world nations where I've been, and you tell them that God's going to make them rich if they follow God, they will laugh you to scorn. It doesn't work anywhere but here in these United States. But the point is this. I don't want to be one of those gospel greed merchants. And I think we need to be aware of that. So before I even say what I'm going to here, be clear about what I'm telling you. I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that if we give to God that he's going to somehow make us rich. Yes, God does bless some people with wealth. He blesses others with good looks, others with good health, others with, other gifts. But there's no linkage between our giving to God and him being obligated to make us rich. Paul warned Timothy about this. He warned about the constant friction that went on between men of depraved mind, deprived of the truth, who suppose that godliness is a means of gain. And then he warned that the love of money is the root of all sorts of evil. Now, with that said, I do want to come back around, and I want to build a balance. I think it's a biblical balance between one extreme and another here. The Bible does tell us that we will be blessed if our hearts are right. Jesus speaks about this over in the book of Luke. He says, "Give and it will be given to you. Pressed down like in a bushel basket, pressed down, shaken together, running over. They will pour into your lap. For whatever measure you deal out to others, it will be dealt to you in return." And by the way, to my knowledge, there is only one place in all 66 books of our Bible where God ever one time told his people to test him on anything. Now, this occurred 300 or 400 years before Jesus came along. It was at a time when the Israeli nation was in a real mess. The prophets were on the take, the priests were corrupt, people had left God in their hearts, and everybody was upset. It was a bad moment in their history. And God steps into this, and he says, "Test me." You see, God is upset at his people, and for one of the reasons he's upset is because they're ripping him off. They're not giving like he's told them to give. And he knows that if his people are not giving financially, they will not be giving of their hearts either. They're not going to be doing other things right before him. So in the book of Malachi, here's what God says. He says, "Will a man rob God?" You're robbing me, but you say, "How have we robbed thee?" And God says, "You've robbed me in tithes and contributions." Now he says, "You want to get right with me? Before he even says that, he's saying, you need to understand that you're cursed with a curse, for you're robbing me, the whole nation of you." So then he says, do you want to get right with me? Bring the whole tithe into the storehouse so that there may be food in my house. And watch this, test me now in this, says the Lord of hosts. He says, you start giving like you're supposed to and test me. See if I don't bless you in 3 ways. First off, I'm going to bless you with general blessings. I will open for you the windows of heaven. I'll pour out a blessing until there is no more need. Number 2, he tells this agriculturally based economy that the crops are going to be coming in. Then I will rebuke the devourer for you so that it may not destroy the fruits of the ground, nor will your vine in the field cast its grapes. And number 3, he tells them that they're going to live at peace with all the other nations. And all the nations will call you blessed. Why? Because you shall be a delightful land. You see, this is what God tells his people will happen if they get their hearts right and do their giving correctly. Now, I told you a moment ago that I would come back to that little $3,000 gift that I gave Bill Turner back in 1979. Honestly, when Bill left town, I was scared. I was thinking, Steve, you're going to have to work just that much harder to try to replenish that money. But let me tell you what did happen. Bonnie and I noticed almost immediately that our clients started paying us more quickly than they had before. People came to us that we would never in a million years have expected would want us to represent them, asking us to represent them. And I can tell you that over the next 25 plus years that I owned that company, we never one time had a money losing quarter. Now, again, I don't know about this, and like I said, I'm going to have to ask God some questions. But I have a belief that back in 1979, God looked down into the heart of a 20-something-year-old kid who had a lot of spiritual growing up to do. And he said, you know, that old boy did not have a really good attitude about that giving thing, but at least he signed the check. Now watch what I'm going to do. And whew, it was like the windows of heaven were open. God is so good. He is so kind. He is so awesome. He is so all-knowing. He knows what I need, but more than I know what I need. He knows how to give. He knows how to hold back to protect me from myself. This is our God. We talk all the time and do all this shucking and jiving about how I'm, all excited for the beautiful by and by. Well, the real question for some of us is, what are we doing right here in the nasty now and now? What are we doing with the green stuff that's in our billfolds? We need to be Christians that are giving like God has called us to give. And I just feel very passionate about that. I think it's very, very important. Now, with that said, let's leave the A of acknowledging and let's go to the B, learning to budget our money. And again, people don't like that word budget, but we're going to have some fun with it here. The number one reason in America that small businesses crash and fail is because of poor record keeping. And again, many people will say, well, I crashed and burned. My family got into trouble because of other things. The leading reason for personal financial breakdown and for bankruptcies in America today is medical cost. And the average family that bankrupts because of medical bills is bankrupting on something in the range of about $20,000 or less. Now again, I'm not suggesting for a minute that $20,000 isn't a lot of money, but I am saying this. If we will learn the same lesson that businesses need to learn, and that is that we need to plan so we don't get into trouble, then a $20,000 medical bill will not sink our boats. It's a matter of planning ahead. Most businesses and most families that fail because they just simply have not planned ahead like they should. So let's talk about how we do that. Nobody would ever think about building this beautiful building. And by the way, I've just seen your new auditorium. If you haven't been in to see it, you're going to love this place. It is gorgeous. But nobody would have come in to do that remodel or to build this gymnasium, family life center, or anything else here without a written plan. But all over America, every single month, there are millions of us. We get our paychecks, we pop them in the bank, we start writing checks, we start paying bills, and then we run out of money before we run out of month, and we're back in that same downward spiral of living on credit cards and stalling collectors. Christians, we don't need to be living like this. I'm going to give you 3 reasons that I've found over these years why people don't like to budget. Number 1, they say, well, Steve, I just don't know where to start. Fair enough. In about 5 minutes here, everybody here is going to know where to start. And I'm not going to stand up here and bore you to tears by putting together a budget for you. I am going to show you the principles to make it work. Number 2, the other thing I run into, people say, well, Steve, I'm just not a money geek. This money stuff confuses me. Come on, really? I mean, it's like me standing up here and saying, you know something? I'm not a French chef, and I cannot prepare Chateaubriand. So henceforth, from now on, Steve Diggs isn't going to be eating any more food. I mean, really? I don't have to be a French chef to go home and knock out a peanut butter sandwich. I don't have to be a CPA to do a budget. All I need are 3 items. You might want to write these down and get your pencils and papers up, because if you want to do a budget, everybody, you're going to have to go out to the store and purchase a sheet of paper. And you're going to also have to purchase a pencil to write on it. And if you're a big spender, go ahead and knock out another $3 or $4 and get a calculator or use your phone. Listen, I'm saying this to be ridiculous. What I'm saying is, all you need to do a budget are 2 things. You need some information and you need a ton of motivation. Now, I used to come in front of audiences all the time and say, and a lot of speakers have said this, you know, the longest 15-inch trip in the world is the one from the head to the heart. I don't believe that one anymore. I believe the longest 15-inch trip in the world is the one from the heart to the head. We got to get our hearts right, and then we send that data northward to the brain, and that really systematizes what we need to be doing. But the point is, to do a budget, we need some information. I'm going to give you that, and we need a ton of motivation. Here's the third reason people tell me they don't like to budget. They say, Steve, budgeting is just such a downer. It's such a negative, depressing thing to do. I mean, I associate budgets with things like pain and austerity and scrimping. And somebody comes up after church and says, hey, Steve, we're all going out to eat together. You want to come eat with us? And I have to say, I can't go to eat because, you know, I'm on a budget. I've got to go home and eat cheese and crackers. And if the cheese hasn't molded yet, I can't even eat that. You know, this is what we think that a budget is. That isn't what a budget is. A budget is something that is radically going to improve our lives. A better way to look at a budget is simply this. Understand that it's going to be a way to never again have to stall a creditor in your life. Everything is going to change. We're always going to have money when good causes come around. We're never going to regret the gifts that we bought at Christmas in January. How many of us have done that? You know what the longest walk in the world is? It's the one at the end of January, from our house down to the mailbox. We get to the mailbox, pull out that thing. And you know something, I guess maybe I'm wrong. Maybe the longest 15-inch trip or longest walk in the world is not the one going down to the mailbox, it's the one coming back, looking at all those bills for stuff that I bought for people that I halfway know, who by now have either traded it in for the cash or given it to somebody else with their name on it, but I had the honor of paying for the next 2 years. I'm not going to live like that anymore, and with a budget, it's going to stop that stuff. Oh, here's one that's happened to me. Never again having a waiter come back to the table with all my friends sitting around there with my credit card waving around saying, hey, this thing doesn't work if you got a good one. Having a budget is going to stop that. And having a budget means that I ain't going to be fighting my spouse anymore. That'd be a real hoot for a whole bunch of us. It's going to change the dynamics of our lives. You know, marketing people, though, know that names mean things. For instance, we don't have used cars anymore. These are all pre-owned autos. And we don't have TV reruns. These are encore performances. And you know something? The credit card companies don't like to talk about late charges. They like to talk about service fees. Sounds better, right? So I got to thinking about this a ways back. I got to thinking, maybe what I want to do here is I want to rename budgeting. Instead of me calling this thing a budget, why don't we start calling it what it really is? It's a personal financial freedom plan. And it will give us freedom if we will just plan. If you want to, just call it your PFFP for short. I want to talk to you right here, right now, about how to do this. I'm going to share with you 9 keys to developing a successful financial plan. And this will change our lives and change our family trees. If we train our kids, our grandkids about this stuff, it's going to make all the difference in the world. Let me just tell you something. Bonnie and I were not perfect parents. But we have 4 kids that are totally grown, that not a single one of them has a penny of debt except on their mortgages. They've got a bought and paid for college education. They've got their cars paid for. Everything's paid for. And it all hails back to the days that Bonnie and I started doing this ourselves and talking to them about this stuff, helping them to understand how to deal with money. Here goes. The first thing we have to have together if we're going to do this personal financial freedom plan correctly, is teamwork. Now, again, I'm talking right now about marriage. You guys that are married in here, I'm talking to you right now. I'm just going to simply tell you that in marriage, there are 2 kinds of money. There's what we call H&H money, and there's M&M money. Now, what are these? Well, the H&H money, that's the bad stuff. That is the his and her money. In my judgment, we shouldn't have his and her money in marriages. The only his and her stuff I want in a marriage is this stuff right here, the towels, okay? And the reason for that, there's a reason for that. When I get married, I want to have enough confidence in the person I'm marrying to trust them. And if I don't, I'm probably not needing to marry them to start with. Now, again, listen, I'm not trying to make this thing stand on all four and walk. There are going to be exceptions. I mean, obviously, if you're elderly, if you've been widowed and you're remarrying, you want to keep your estate separate for your families, I'm not talking about that. And I'm not talking about situations where maybe there's a drug or an alcohol issue going on in the family and one spouse has to deal with the money. I get that stuff. But in a general situation, mom and daddy ought to both be pulling that sucker together, working together on the money. H&H money is bad. So what is the M&M money? That is not this kind of M&Ms, it's this kind of M&Ms, just married money. It's money where we bring it together because we're married. Now, I will tell you that in every marriage, there are two radically different people, very different people. Now, over here we have the big spender. The big spender is the person who just simply makes it his or her job to be sure that the hole at the bottom of the bucket is bigger than the one at the top. They drive this other person crazy. This other person over here, this is the money geek. This is the person who really does like working on the money, doing budgets, and counting every penny and all this stuff. Now, here's how we do the money budget, okay? Whoever is the geek, you get to run point on this. Oh, goody, am I the boss? No, I didn't say you're the boss. You're not the boss. You get to run point. You get to do what you like to do in your natural habitat. You get to sit here and crunch the numbers, spend 5 or 6 hours, put together a great budget. And by the way, there are all kinds of great budgets out there. You can do them online. You can do them on paper. We've got good stuff in the, many of you have already gotten a copy of the Stop Running on an Empty book. If you do, there's a good budget form in there. There's a good one in the No Debt, No Sweat book. You've already got some of you. And if you do a follow-up study, we've got good budgets there, all that stuff. The point is, it's not going to be hard to find a budget form. The trick is to use it. But Geek, it is your job to fill that thing out, get it all put together. And Geek, you're going to have all kinds of papers and everything here that you love. Geeks love lots of papers. And they end up with about 3 feet of paper. Now, here's what usually happens, and it's the wrong thing. When the geek gets all this paper together, he or she is really proud of this. So they load it all up. They come walking in here to the big spinner and say, come on, let's have that money talk. And then they take you to what room? What room? Come on, tell me. I know, you're thinking it. The kitchen, right? They take you in the kitchen, drop it on the table, turn on that fluorescent light, and the two of you sit down on separate sides and glare at each other like you're at some kind of a union management negotiating thing. Ain't going to do that this time. What you're going to do, geek, is this. You're going to go over here, and you're going to get your 3 feet of paper, but you're going to kind of whinny it down to maybe 2 or 3 skinny sheets of paper. You might even roll them up so they're not too noticeable. And you walk into your big spending spouse, and you say, sweetheart, could we have that money talk? And then do not go to the kitchen. Go to someplace where you can sit side by side. Sit there on the couch together. Better yet, why don't you go to the bedroom? Light candles. Turn on some pretty music. Use bizarre language. Sweetheart, darling, kissy poo. I'm telling you, you do this the right way, this can be the beginning of a very cozy evening, if you know what I'm talking about. My point is, we're going to do this differently than we've ever done it before, and suddenly people are much happier. People are getting along. This changes the way we do budgets, and we have to do this if we love each other and really want to get ahead on this. Number 2, teamwork is the first step. The second step is to learn what your true income is. All along, I'll ask people, I say, so how much money do you make? I don't come up on people on the street and ask them. I'm not saying that. So when people come to me for counseling, I'll say, how much do you make? And they'll say, $70,000 a year. Ding, 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 ding. Wrong. That is not what they're making. That is what is called the gross income. You know why they call that the gross income? Because that's how you feel when you realize you're not getting all that. It's before they take out the FICA, the Medicare, the union dues, and all the rest of that junk. And by the time they're messing around, done messing around with your money, that $70,000 looks a whole lot more like about 55 or 60. But you've got to know what your true income is to know what you have to work with. Number 3, we're going to do this PFFP on a monthly basis. Whoa, Steve, back up the money bus. Are you telling me I have to do this every month? No, I'm saying that we're going to do it. The first month it may take 3 or 4 hours to get it together. But every month, we probably need to glance at it together. Husband and wife kiss each other on the cheek. 2 minutes later, they're gone into other things. But we need to keep our minds reminded of this. And I'm not saying that if you're 50 years or 60 or 70 years old and you've got all the money things going fine in your family, no issues, I'm not saying you need to do this. I'm talking to people that have not been married that long, people that are still struggling and getting their money equilibrium going in the marriage. These are the folks that need to look at this thing every single month. Number 4, do your PFFP in written form. Listen, Christians, there is no such animal as a budget that's not on paper. I don't care whether we're talking about a budget or a new law or the Constitution of a nation. Until that sucker is reduced to writing, it's nothing more than a bunch of free-floating ideas out here in wide open space, ready for revision with every little whim that comes around. By the way, you just saw my bald spot? Ha! It's getting bigger every year. But this is about as good as this piece of eye candy gets these days, so just, just going to have to take it. At any rate, we have to do this in written form. Number 5, let's write our PFFP in the order of priority. This is when I say to myself, okay, Steve, if I only had X number of dollars to use this month, what would be the first thing I would buy? Would it be my housing, my clothing, my giving? Boom, put that at the top of the list. What comes next? What comes next? What comes next? Very important to get this priority straight. Number 6, don't be overly optimistic. A lot of times when people start a budget, they're all excited. And once they got the budget together, then they throw the same items back in, but now they're throwing them in for a lot less dollars. Maybe it's something that we've been spending $100 a month on forever, but now we've got a new budget and we're just all motivated, so we throw it in for $40. Trouble is, we keep spending the $100, and after 2 or 3 months, we're saying, you see, budgets don't work. That is not a budget problem. That's a spending issue. So don't be overly optimistic with yourself. And number 7, be kind to yourselves. When we start this budget, we're not going to turn this into a scorched earth moment in our lives, and we're not going to do that. We're going to look at happy ways to enjoy it. I mean, maybe we cannot go out to the movies. And by the way, I don't know very many movies we Christians need to be going out to anymore. But instead of that, we stay home, pop some corn, and watch television together. I mean, we're going to start doing things differently. Yeah, maybe we can't take the kids bowling, but we can sure take them in the backyard and throw a Frisbee. This is a great learning experience, but don't turn this into some kind of a deluge of pain to put everybody through. We want the kids to see this as something good as they get older. And number 8, don't forget the set-aside items. Most of us have some things that we do not buy every month. A lot of us will purchase a vacation every couple of years. A lot of us will buy our car insurance like every 6 months. But if we're not putting money away ahead of time each month in advance for these items, then when one of these comes around, you ain't going to get to do it. Or we're going to do something really stupid, like taking out that burned out credit card and running up even more debt on a 2-week vacation and coming home with a sunburn and a card burned out. This is not the way we need to be living life. We're going to put our money in advance. We're going to change things. And number 9, we're going to distinguish between what is essential and what is optional. And folks, living here in the United States of I've got to have everything, that's a hard sell for a lot of folks. But I'm going to tell you what, in my opinion, are the 6 essentials here. For me, the 6 essentials are these: my giving, my housing, my food, my clothing, my transportation, my medication are my 6 items right there. My giving, my housing, my clothing, my food, my transportation, and medication. After that, most everything else is an option. That means that a lot of the things that we don't want to think of as options are options. And even within that list, there are a lot of optional things we don't have to be doing. We don't have to buy food at restaurants. We can make it and take it with us from home. We don't have to buy expensive clothes. I'm telling you the truth, Walmart sells all kinds of good stuff. And I'm just going to tell you something. I'm wearing a pair of $20 shoes right here, right this minute, that I bought at Walmart. And they feel fine. You don't have to spend the most money to do whatever you want to do. Listen, let me just share with you real quickly what I call the Diggs family secret weapon. And this is, by the way, no secret. It's one of the most widely taught money control techniques out there. This is what is commonly known as the envelope system. And I'll bet you that let me get back over to that. It kind of popped ahead on me, didn't it? I'll bet there are a bunch of you out there that are already using this. I hope there are. But if you don't know what it is, here's how it works. And by the way, if you want an envelope system, you can go online and buy one of those handy-dandy deals and pay $30 for it or something. Or you can do just what Bonnie and I do. The slide keeps hopping ahead on me. I'm sorry. You can do just what Bonnie and I do. what we do, and what we used to do anyways, we would just buy these cheap little envelopes for 20 cents, and we would write the names of items that we buy every month on them, such as maybe like the gifts that we get for the kids, maybe the restaurants that we go out to eat at, maybe the gifts that we give to other people, whatever. We have separate envelopes for these. And we put the money in when we get paid. And then as the month goes on, as one of those items comes up, you just open up the envelope and pay for it. And when you run out of money in that envelope, what happens? You stop doing that. That way at church, tonight, there are not too many of us here, but maybe church is over and somebody comes running up to you and says, hey, tonight we're going to go out to McDonald's. You want to come with us? All you have to do is look in that envelope. And if there's money in the envelope, what do we get to do? Yeah, we're going to hit the golden arches. But if there's nothing in that envelope, what are we going to get to do? Yeah, we're going to go home, get 2 pieces of bread, smear some mustard on it, put it together, and pretend. We are not going to be buying food at restaurants that we don't have money for. This is how we start to change, discipline our lives, and do better going forward. Now, we're coming down the home stretch here, but this final section is so very important. I want to talk to you right now about the C of learning how to control our money. So how do we do this? Well, so far in our visits this morning and this evening, I've been mainly talking about the need money. This is the money that we need to simply get by on every month. I want to begin to make a bend in the river right now, and I want to start talking to you a little bit about the seed money. I think I just swallowed something. I hope you didn't fly in. Anyways, I want to talk to you a little bit here about the seed money. This is the money that is going to rock our lives in wonderful ways going forward if we learn some basic strategies and ways to do this stuff. One of 2 things is going to happen. Steve Diggs is either going to learn how to control his money, or my money is forevermore going to be controlling me. And like I said this morning, I do not want to be mastered by anybody but the Lord Jesus Christ. Money, as the old saying goes, is a wonderful servant, but it is a terrible, terrible master. Jesus is my master, my money is my servant, and I've got to get that in priority and live that way. So here are 3 ways to achieve financial freedom. Number 1, you can spend less. Number 2, you can earn more. Number 3, you can invest wisely. We're going to talk about that tomorrow night. And there is a 4th thing up here that you can do. I don't recommend number 4, because that will take you away from the house for 5-10 years at a time, okay? Using a mask and a gun. But I do want to talk to you a little bit about these first 3, because here's the problem. Most people, when they're asked what the problem is, they will default to number 2, and they'll say, "We see, I'm just not earning enough money." Yeah, and sometimes that's the case. Sometimes you do need to go out and get more work. Nothing wrong with that. But in most cases, probably 70 or 80% of the time, the biggest part of the problem is number 1. It's what we're spending our money on right now. It's what we're doing with the money that we already have coming in. You see, we've got to learn how to control what we have, because it is a bottomless bucket if you think you can out-earn your spending. You can't do that. I know people that are multi-millionaires that are always so deeply in debt they can't even suck air. The point is, no matter how much money you make, if you train yourself poorly when you don't have a lot of money, no matter how much money you ever make in the future, you're going to do the same dumb things with it. And you're always going to be hurting. The trouble is, the more money you're in debt with, the worse the hurt is. And we've got to get control of it when we're really getting into this process. So how do we do this? I'm going to share with you what I call the wolf barrier. It's my 10-stone wall to keep this ugly wolf over here away from my front door over here. And before I do that, I do want to share with you 3 strategies that we're going to need to have under our belt, if you will, in order to play out this wolf barrier that I'm coming up with. You're going to need some money to do what I'm about to teach you. Here's how you're going to get the money. Number 1, you're going to sell stuff. This means we are going to get rid of everything we have that we don't have to keep. You get to keep the wedding photos, but you're going to sell the frames. You're going to get rid of everything. We're not going to be going on that luxury vacation this year. We're going to go to grandmama's and let her cook for 2 days. We're not going to be spending money that we do not have. We're going to change how we've been living. We're going to sell stuff, do stuff differently. We're going to, as I've already said about this, we're going to be cutting expenses. We're not going to be going on those vacations. We're not going to be, just wasting money like we had before. But the third thing, and this is the thing that will make the big difference. The third thing is we're going to start to work some serious hours. I literally had a couple in my office that were deeply in debt a ways back, wanting to know how to get out of debt. And they just, I mean, they had a lot of debt. How do we get out of debt? Turns out that she was working about 30 hours a week. He was working about 40. They didn't even have kids. And I said, well, you both need another job. You need to be working at least 80 hours every single week. And I promise you, I'm telling the truth. Those two, man and woman, both just broke down in tears, crying about that. I'm telling you that until about the 1930s, very few people on this planet had ever thought up the idea of a 40-hour work week. I mean, for most of history, people worked 10, 12-hour days, at least 6 days a week. And today, yeah, we work 40-hour work week, but still, that's not enough for most families to really fully get by, and it's definitely not enough if you're deeply in debt and you're trying to dig out of this hole. This means we're going to get second and third jobs. We're going to start a job. We're going to clean people's cars. We're going to clean people's houses. We're going to clean laundry. My sister used to bring in laundry. She's a school teacher. She brought in so much laundry, she just absolutely blew the roof off and made all the money she needed to get herself out of debt. These things can be done if we're willing to do them. And anybody who is complaining about being in debt, who has reasonable health and is not willing to work 60 or 80 hours a week, there's not a lot you can do for them. You've got to get serious. Steve, do I have to work like this the rest of my life? No, sir. But you do for the next 1 to 4 years probably to get over this mess. I'm going to talk to you about how to do that tomorrow night. But the point is, we're going to get serious and we're going to work a little more. Now, with that said, I want to take you straight to my wolf barrier. This wolf barrier is one that I use. You may or may not want to build yours exactly like I did, and that's fine. But I am suggesting that everybody in our audience needs to have a wolf barrier, a way to plan so they know exactly where every next dollar that comes in is going to go out to. With that said, here we go. First thing I want to do with my wolf barrier, and by the way, I'm just wondering, can you all see this on the screen up here? Okay, I'm sorry. I don't know if they can turn the screen on so you can see it or not, but nonetheless, we have this wolf barrier. The first stone that I want to have, you see, you folks that have stayed at home, you're really getting to see things better than these folks are right now. So anyways, the first step is our crisis cash. This is that green paper folding stuff. Some of us used to have some of this. It's got pictures of dead presidents on it. Okay, we're going to keep some of that around. So when we need $60 or $80 because one of the kids needs a tetanus shot down at the clinic, it's no big deal. We just go and get her done. The next thing I want to do, oops, I just hit the wrong button there. Next thing I want to do, I want to get my Murphy fund together. Now this is what most folks call their emergency fund. This is the money that I want to have around for when bad stuff happens to good people. This is what I want to have around when you know, we get into trouble. Like I said this morning, the axle breaks in one car, the same week the transmission goes out of the other one, and I need some money. How much money am I going to put in here? My goal is to eventually get my Murphy fund up to approximately 5% of my annual income. So if I'm making $80,000 a year, I would eventually like to have at least $4,000 in my Murphy fund. Well, Steve, how in the world am I going to get the money there? Here's how you're going to do it. You're going to sell stuff, you're going to cut expenses, you're going to work a few extra hours. You're going to get some money in that thing. Most anybody that does this in a few months can get that money in there, and then we have done something that is really special. We've stepped our emotions back from the line. And guys, I want to just talk to you, those of you in here who are husbands. Listen up. All of the studies show the same thing. Women tend to be far more security conscious than we guys tend to be. And if you really love your women, men, one of the best things you can do is put your arms around your women financially and step her back from the edge of a cliff. She doesn't want to be looking down there with her toes dangling over the edge of that thing. And the Murphy Fund is where we start to do this. Remember this, folks, mama ain't happy, what? Ain't nobody happy. So we need to make sure that we're doing this. This is important. Next thing we're going to do is consider the life insurance. Now again, I don't even like the phrase life insurance. I like to call this love insurance because most of us that need life insurance need it to protect the people who depend on our income in the event of our death. Now, as many of you know, there are two widely disparate types of life insurance out here. There's the old-fashioned stuff that's been around since Moses was here called whole life insurance or permanent life or variable or universal. This is all whole life insurance. Over here, there's another kind of life insurance. And this is term life insurance. Creatively named that because they buy it for a term, right? Maybe for 10, 20 years, whatever. Now, people always say, well, Steve, which one is best? I will tell you that they both have attributes, but for most people, in my personal belief, for most people, I think the term insurance is probably better. Why? Term insurance costs so much less. You don't get the bells and whistles that you do with whole life, but you pay much less. 40-year-old that wants to buy, say, $500,000 worth of whole life insurance could easily spend $6,000 or $8,000 a year on that. Now, they'll tell you, hey, you're getting a retirement program with it and everything else. The truth is, in many of those cases, it's not too much more than an overpriced savings account. Over here with term insurance, that same 50-year-old could probably get $500,000 of coverage for $500 or $600 a year. And then the old adage kicks in. You buy term, you invest the difference. Now, if we're not going to do this part, maybe whole life is better than nothing. But if we will discipline ourselves and take the money, the difference that we would be spending, and get it into a good retirement plan, you will probably, no guarantees, but you will probably do better. So for me, it makes sense. How much insurance do we need? Well, it depends on who you ask. I tell people that we need probably at least 10 to 12 times our annual income. Making $60,000 a year, you probably want $500,000 to $700,000 worth of life insurance. And by the way, Mama, if you do not work outside the home, listen carefully. You probably need life insurance as well. Because if something bad were to happen to you, if you were to die, think about where your family would be. Think about what it would cost to replicate the child care, the homemaking, the clerical work, the 97 things you're doing a day. And come up with that number. And by the way, one study indicated that it's well over $100,000 per mom. But come up with whatever number seems right. Multiply that by 10 to 12 times and get that insurance on yourself. And ladies, the good news is your insurance will probably not cost as much as your husband's, because guys just die faster. Not saying it's your fault, but I just say we die faster. So anyways, that's just something to be thinking about. Next thing we want to do, we want to pay off our short-term debt. All right, let's talk about that. What is short-term debt? Short-term debt is literally anything for most of us except for the house bill. Everything but the mortgage. It's all these credit cards, the school bills, the car loans, all of this junk that's keeping us up in the middle of the night. Well, Steve, you bit off a big one there. How in the world am I going to pay off my short-term debt? I'm glad you asked. I'm going to tell you. What we're going to do is we're simply going to go over here in our house. We're going to get a crowbar. Go over here in our house to wherever we have our debt closet. See, what I've learned over the years, I've learned that most people that have a lot of debt have what I call an imaginary debt closet. They don't like to think about those debts, so they kind of put them in the back of their mind, okay? Today, I'm going to take charge. Crowbar in hand, boom, I pop the door off that debt closet, and I'm going to pull out every single one of those ugly debts. All 6 credit cards, the 3 car loans, the school bills, everything I've got. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to get ready to kill these suckers. First, and again, how am I going to do this? Well, I'm going to be selling, cutting, and working like a madman. I'm going to pick out one debt, and I'm going to kill that debt first. Dave Ramsey, I always get things mixed up. I think Dave Ramsey, doesn't he say to pay off the one that you owe the least on first? I think so. That's fine. Other people say, no, pay off the one with the highest interest rate. That's fine. I don't care. Pick out the one that has the ugliest green hair on its tongue in your mind, the one you hate the most, and go after that sucker. Stake in this hand, hammer in this one, sell, cut, work, boom, kill that sucker dead. In the meantime, be paying a minimum amount on all these other debts. Once number 1 is gone, take the money from that, go after 2. When 2's gone, 1 and 2 go after number 3. Again, Ramsey calls that snowballing. Susie Orman calls it rolling down. Clark Howard calls it laddering. I don't care what you call it. I call it just getting a financial life. But I'm telling you, if you do this correctly, and you're juicing it the whole time, selling, cutting, and working, you can, in many cases, not all, but in many cases, you can be completely out of short-term debt in 1 to 4 years. And boy, does the air smell better after that happens. I've had people with well over $100,000 of credit card bills do this very thing. You can do it. Right now, the devil's whispering in some of your ears, telling you that that crazy guy from Nashville is out of his mind. I am not out of my mind. Certifiably crazy? Maybe. But I am not out of my mind. I am telling you correctly that if you do this, likelihood is you can get completely out of debt in less than 4 years. Man, you have changed everything. What happens next? This is when I get the I don't need this job fund together. You see, I want to have at least 3 to 6 months of living expenses for the day the boss comes in and cans me. So how do I pull this one off? Well, 2 or 3 things to remember. Number 1, we are going to continue selling, cutting, and working. But remember, 90 days of living expenses is not the same thing as 90 days of income. Remember what we said about knowing our true income? For instance, if you're making $80,000 a year, your 90-day burn rate is not $20,000. That is your gross income before you pay taxes, before you do your giving, hopefully before you do some of your saving. You're probably living on more like $15,000 or $16,000 of that. It's still a lot of money, but it's a little bit less. But let me tell you what's really going to put juice to this, what's going to really make it possible for you to get this job fund together. Remember that last thing on our list right here, paying off the short-term debt? This is the first month in your adult life that you crawled out of bed and you don't have a single debt to pay. That $219 debt isn't there anymore. That $76 a month thing, that's not there. That $347, that's not. None of those debts are there anymore. You don't have to think about them. And don't you suppose that if you were doing that 3-point steroid pack, selling, cutting, and working, and you had no debt, you could get this job fund together in a hot hurry? Do you see where you are now? You're with that rarefied group of Americans. No debt, a job fund. Wow, what do I get to do next? This is when we're going to look at our tax-advantaged retirement planning. Now, is this to say that you've done no retirement planning before now? Not necessarily. That depends on your philosophy, on your age, what the boss offers, all sorts of things. But now you can go whole hog into this thing. You can get really focused on it. Steve, what do you mean by tax-advantaged retirement planning? Good question. I'm talking about anything that gives you tax benefits in your retirement savings. Things like 401ks, 403bs, IRAs, SEP programs, 457 plans. All of these are great because they allow you to either pay your taxes in advance and not have to pay on them later, or let your money grow tax-free until you take it out, and it grows faster that way. The point is you need to learn about these and get into them. I need to look at the tables again. But most of us can put $6,000 or $7,000 a year away in an IRA. If your boss has a matching plan at work, a 401k, a lot of people can put up to 8% of their money away in that and get matching money from it. That's like free money. You've got to know what's available and get after it. Next thing we're going to do is we're going to save for college. Now, sometimes folks say to me, Steve, are you putting college off after my retirement saving for some good reason? You mean you want me to retire comfortably and let my poor little kids have to pay for college? No, I'm not telling you have to do that. I'm just telling you what I did, what Bonnie and I did. We pretty much did that. We thought of it this way, that we would a whole lot rather get our own retirement together and then worry about the college side than to worry about the college side and then one day be boomerang parents that our kids had to take care of. Because to my knowledge, as much as I hate them, you can get college loans. But I don't think they've come up with the retirement loans yet. So I want to do that retirement gig first. And I want to talk to you a little bit about paying for college because this is a prickly issue. And I'm going to say something that I didn't used to say in these seminars, but in the last year or two I've been saying it more and more. Christians, we need to think long and hard about sending our kids away to some pagan school after we've done everything we know how to for 18 years to raise them up in godly ways and allow them to be destroyed over 4 years with anarchists, atheists, and every other sort of person that we do not agree with. Now again, you say, well, a kid can't get ahead without a college education. I don't even agree with that fully. There have been a lot of people. Think about Bill Gates, Rush Limbaugh, Peter Jennings. You can just go down the litany of people. What is the guy's name that runs Virgin Airlines? I can't even think of his name. He doesn't have a college education. There are a lot of people that have succeeded big ways in this world without a college education. And the thing is, I want my kid to be godly more than I want him to be a kid with a sheepskin on his wall. There are also lots of Christian colleges, and I know that they cost more, but there can be ways to make this work. Now, how do we pay for college? Okay, let's think about this. One of the best things to do is to start early. Make sure that very early on you're really driving the kids to do well so that they can earn some scholarships, that they can be prepared to clep out of courses in the first part of college that they won't even be required to take. Get the kids doing the right things. But again, let's just pretend that right now you've got an 18-year-old and you've just heard about this, you've got zero money. What are we going to do? Well, there are still things that we can do. There are all sorts of work-study programs where a kid agrees to go to work for some organization, and in return, that organization pays for their college education. In many cases, the United States military makes good sense that way. There are all sorts of options like this. And by the way, moms and dads, there is nothing wrong with letting your kids work in college or work before college. And here's what I mean. There's nothing wrong with letting a kiddo get their high school sheepskin here in the spring, but not start to the university in the fall. Instead, why don't we lay out for a year or two and really make some serious money so then we can pay as we go? Or why don't we lay out for a while, make some money, and then for the first year or two of college, go to some inexpensive community college or even an online college and knock out those general courses. And then by then we have enough money to pay as we go to a university. We can do this thing if we really, really want to. And there are all sorts of solutions out here. Don't let this kind of thing ride you, and by all means, and parents, I'm talking to you as clearly as I know how to. I'm an old guy. I'm 68 years old. I've been through the ringer on a lot of things. I'm telling you the truth here. I've seen a lot of parents' peace totally destroyed because they didn't feel like they could pay for college for their kids. It's a whole lot more important to be a godly parent and hug them and love them to death than it is to pay for them to go to school. The deal we had with our kids, I don't know if it was good or bad, but it worked okay for us. We told our kids from the time that they were just barely big enough to kick around good, we told them, hey, mom and dad are going to pay for college tuition provided you go to an approved college. And in our case, that meant it had to be a Christian college. But anything else you want there, you're going to have to pay for. If you want to live on campus, that's on you. If you like to get some books to go with those classes, that's your job. Well, the kids do this from the time that they were just really little, and we would give them jobs, pay them money, and as they got older, they got jobs. All four of them went to college with a great war chest. But it took all four of them in college about 10 minutes to realize this war chest isn't big enough to do the deal. I'm going to need to work while I'm in college. And listen, something else in that. If you have a kid calls you from college and says, Mom, Dad, I'm just so busy, I don't have time to work in college, I can tell you something, that's the same kid who'll lie to you about other stuff. They are not that busy. They are simply not that busy. There's nothing wrong with letting a kid work some in college. I can still remember our oldest daughter, Megan. She called me one day from college. This was, Bonnie, what year was this? Sophomore year, maybe? I think it was her sophomore year. She called us. She was at Lipscomb. She called me and she said, Dad, guess what? I said, what, Megan? She says, I'm going to get to live on campus again next semester. I said, great. Did you get a job? She said, yes, sir. I said, tell me about your job, babe. She says, Daddy, this is so cool. This is so cool. They're going to let me clean the dorm and wash the toilets, and they're going to give me my room and board. And all I had heard in that sentence was wash the toilets. And I'm thinking to myself, I know the folk that run that school. I can't have my kid washing toilets. And then finally, boing, it dawned on me, Steve, where's the sinful pride of yours coming from? And I finally slowed down enough to kind of count the numbers. Now, this was over 20 years ago, so you got to understand dollars meant a little differently then. But when I counted the numbers, and I realized that Megan's cool little friends, the ones that were working in the office and doing filing, they were paying those kids about $5 an hour. Megan was making the equivalent of approximately $15 an hour. Shoot, I was so proud of that kid that semester, I hugged her all the time. Didn't shake her hands too often, but I hugged her all the time. Kids can get jobs, kids can work, and as much as I hate them, like I said a minute ago, kids can get college loans. But Mom and Daddy, they don't have retirement loans yet. That's why I feel the way I do about this. I'm not putting this on anybody else. I am not a professional financial advisor. I'm not telling you have to do any of these things. I'm just suggesting that some of these things have worked well for us. Next thing we're going to do is continue our retirement savings. Now, by this point, you may have maxed out on your tax-protected retirement. But by this point, you've got everything else pretty much covered. Why not go ahead and get a little more cushion going into retirement? Good mutual funds and the like. And we're going to talk about some of these tomorrow night. Next thing we're going to do is pay off the mortgage. Listen, let me just suggest that we murder the mortgage before we go into retirement. That thing has been with us now for most of the time we've had the house. For all the time we've had the house. And most of it's paid off. And shoot, why not just go ahead and do a little extra work, push a little harder, and get that thing paid off before we go into retirement, and that way we can dump that, whatever it is, $1,000, $2,000 of expenses every month going forward. And then the very last thing I'm going to suggest is this. We are going to become legacy builders. Christians, listen carefully to me. This is so important. There are middle-class Christians all over this country who did some of these things, did things right, all through the years. And as they came into their latter years, they were able to leave significant money behind to bless other people. And if you are saying to yourself, well, I don't know where to give it. Let me just tell you, a good starting place, and again, nobody has asked me to say this, a good starting place is right here with your own home church. Because these people know you, they know what you would want done with it, and at the same moment, they're going to they're going to probably be the best stewards you can find. But give it to some good cause, preferably some Christian cause, and make that money count. Become a legacy builder. Now, this is what I've had to say for tonight. I'm going to kind of wrap it up. John, do you have any closing comments, or should I just shut it down? What do you want done? Okay. John's going to make a couple of comments. John, tomorrow evening, we're going to let people come and buy books if they want to. We have a few left. You want to do that? Okay, let me just, and Bonnie, I don't know if you can, never mind, I'm not going to make you run down there. Don't worry about it. We have 3 books. I told you about them this morning. I'm going to show them again to you here. It's going to be in the air. You're not going to see them, but I'm going to show them to you. The first book is Stop Running on Empty. This is a big hardcover book, 8 essential Christian life skills. Very good book. Everything from dealing with your money to dealing with conflict in your relationships right on down the line. Next book is called Fast Forward Leadership. This is a book filled with photography and all kinds of great things. It's a 14-day plan on becoming a stand-up leader, whether you're a leader at work, in your home, at church, wherever you're at. The final book is called Get the Green Light. I wrote this book specifically for salespeople, 14 days to becoming an incredibly successful salesperson. But I learned over the time since I've written it that all kinds of people are using it to learn better how to deal with their relationships, how to serve customers better, all sorts of things. These books normally, the first book's $26, the other 2 are $17. What we're making a special offer on, and we don't have a lot left, but as long as we've got these, what we're making a special offer on, if you want to get all 3 of them, you can get one at a time if you want, but if you'd like to get all 3 of these books, which is a $60 or $70 value, you can get them all 3 for $30. And I'm just going to suggest that tomorrow night, since we're starting at 7 o'clock, come on by here at 6:30 or whatever, and pick up your books if you'd like to. Tomorrow night, we'll see you, and I'm going to turn it over to Brother John here, and we're going to wish you a great rest of the day. Thank you so much for being with us. Bye-bye.
Again, we're so thankful to Brother Diggs for another wonderful job tonight and helping us to conquer that debt. I hope you've been following along with your red workbook. If you do not have that workbook, you can also pick that up here at the building tomorrow night. We just appreciate so much all of the good information. Hopeful that it will be helpful to you and your family, and we hope that you will be back tomorrow night at 7 o'clock. At this time, we're going to have a word of prayer, and we will then let you go. Let us pray. Our Father and God in heaven, we're so grateful for your great mercy and grace and love for us. Father, we thank you for the knowledge that you provide to us. And we thank you for your servant tonight who has shared that knowledge to help us to be better stewards of the things that you have blessed us with. We pray, dear God, that you would forgive us of our sins, our shortcomings, and help us to always look to you for our strength and help as we go through this life. Father, we ask that you continue to be with us throughout the remainder of this evening. Keep us in your care. In the name of Jesus, we pray. Amen.